Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. Bit of a weird intro. Anyway, welcome back, hope you're having a good day. Today we are going to be working largely with rivers, which is why I thought I would start this episode at the bottom of one. Yeah, a little strange. Anyway, what we're going to do today is make ourselves a drowned farm. And this is where people in Bedrock Edition have it much easier than folks in Java Edition, because as people have been pointing out in the comments of the episode where I first got myself a Trident and tangled with the drowned, farming drowned on Bedrock Edition is very simple. It's as simple as finding yourself a zombie spawner and making sure that all of the zombies in there get converted into drowned by drowning them, by putting a bunch of water around so that they end up suffocating underwater but converting themselves into drowned in the process. The problem with that is that it doesn't work on Java Edition, or at least you can create drowned that way, but what you would want to farm drowned for, specifically Tridents and Nautilus Shells, will not drop from the average drowned. On Bedrock Edition, the regular drowned that you encounter actually have a small chance of dropping a Trident, whereas on Java Edition, unfortunately, that chance does not exist. You can only get a Trident or a Nautilus Shell from a drowned which is already holding a Trident or a Nautilus Shell, and those are only naturally spawned drowned. Drowned converted from zombies do not have the capacity to have a Trident or a Nautilus Shell held in their hand or when they get converted, which means we're going to have to approach this a very different way. We're going to have to use natural spawning mechanics in order to generate enough drowned that are holding Tridents and Nautilus Shells that we can farm. Now let's take a quick look at the Tridents I already have, because for those of you who've been keeping an eye on my gear in this series, I do actually have a few Tridents. I have a backup channeling Trident, my regular channeling Trident after the first one got destroyed in a certain charged creeper incident, and I have a Riptide Trident as well. So you might be wondering why I'm bothering to farm Tridents at all. To be honest, I'm mostly doing it so that we can have an example of a drowned farm in this series, because for you folks at home, you might be playing on a multiplayer server where the ability to have lots and lots of Tridents generated for the entire player base on the server is a kind of advantageous thing. You might be able to sell them to other friends on your server, gain a little bit of diamonds in the process, or maybe even just hand them out freely once you have the farm up and running. But really, it is going to be a case of this being more of a multiplayer server design than a single-player design, because in single-player, as long as you've got lucky with a couple of Trident-wielding drowned that you've encountered in the wild, you're never really going to have to worry about Tridents unless you are accident-prone and you lose them a whole bunch. Now you might be thinking, oh, a drowned farm, okay, so we're going to the ocean today, because the ocean is where you've probably seen the most drowned spawn in the past if you're playing on Java Edition. However, the ocean is not the ideal environment for drowned spawning, for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, there is so much ocean around that drowned can spawn in quite a wide radius, and that makes them very difficult to control. If drowned are spawning up to 128 blocks away, then there is less chance that you'll get drowned generating close enough to pathfind towards you and therefore put themselves within range to be attacked with your sword and farm. Now the other problem with drowned naturally spawning in oceans is that ocean biomes only spawn drowned below a certain level. It has to be below Y58 as far as I remember, and that presents a problem because normally the most efficient way of building a mob farm is to build it in the sky, away from any spawnable area for hostile mobs of any kind. And it's not really possible to build a drowned farm above an ocean at Y190 because drowned just won't spawn up there. You'll basically get a box that generates a ton of fish and not much else. Luckily for us, the same restriction does not apply to river biomes. So what we're going to be doing is building a drowned farm in the sky above a river biome. Now, much like when we built the squid farm, it's going to be beneficial for us to pick an area with a large amount of river space. That way, we can maximize the amount of spawnable space that we have for the drowned themselves. However, unlike the squid farm, we don't have to build it in the ground here, so we don't have to dry out a large section of river. Instead, we can build it in the sky, basically copying the outline of the river and allowing for us to build a pretty large spawnable space for the drowned. And you will need quite a large space because typically, if you build a small drowned farm, you're not really going to get that many. They tend to like to spawn spaced out from each other. They don't pack spawn all that much either. They mostly spawn individually. One other thing to consider is the elevation of the terrain around you. You probably don't want to build one of these in a mountain biome because the terrain will stretch up to sometimes Y90 or even Y100. It can get pretty tall, and as a result, you'll have to build the farm higher and higher in the world in order to escape the possibility of mobs spawning on the surface. So what I've done is I've loaded up Mine Atlas, I've looked around for areas that will be suitable for a drowned farm in my world, and I think I've come across a pretty decent one. And that is this little area here. We're out about 1,800 blocks from world center, about 1,000 blocks north, and right here we have a little kind of island in the center of what is effectively a circle of river biome. Now, it does get cut off over here a little bit, but that gets cut off in terms of the terrain generation, not the biome itself. You might be able to notice this patch of slightly cooler colored grass here, this slightly grayer grass. That right there is still a river biome. So technically speaking, we have a bunch of spawnable space here for the drowned. And the reason you won't find the drowned crawling out of rivers in Java Edition is that they also require a low enough light level. We need to make sure that the light level in our farm is nice and dark for them to spawn. It's why you tend to see them more in oceans than anywhere else. But aside from this section of forest hills here, which could be easily taken down with a decent shovel and maybe a haste 2 beacon to get rid of the stone, we need to be about 128 blocks up from here, so that's going to be around Y193. That seems like the highest point we'll need to be, and we could always end up torching some of the area down here just to make sure that mobs don't spawn on the surface if we get a little bit lower down. But if I come up to the top of the scaffolding tower, which is going to have to be twice as high to reach our AFK spot, you can see that all the way around here we have a decent-sized river biome, which we should be able to trace the outline of and reproduce up here in the sky and maximize the amount of area that can spawn the drowned while we're up here. So aside from forgetting the scaffold, I brought a bunch of supplies with me that we're going to need for this little experiment. We're going to need a bunch of building materials, and I'm choosing stone here mainly because we can surround the entire thing with stone or stone brick or any kind of solid block to keep it dark inside the farm. Some folks choose to build theirs out of glass and just build a giant roof on it so that you can see stuff spawning on the inside, but I'm going to trust in the mechanics here and make sure that we've got everything completely darkened on the inside without needing to build a giant roof over the top. The upshot of that being that potentially we can decorate this in a fun way and make sure that it doesn't look like a big open platform in the middle of the sky. Next up, we have some ice, which we're going to use to generate some water sources when 2 water buckets for an infinite water source is not necessarily going to be enough. And I also have some building materials in the form of the spruce logs and some oak leaves or glass or something like that as a non-spawnable block to create a platform for the drowned to walk on. We do have a couple more stops we need to make before we can complete this farm design, though. The first of which is going to be over here at our turtle island, because we will need a couple of turtle eggs, and with our silk touch pick we can gather a couple of those. These are going to be the bait, effectively, for our drowned farm, because much like other types of zombies, the drowned will pathfind towards turtle eggs in an attempt to jump up and down on them and break them. We can use that to lure them over a set of open trapdoors and make sure that they fall into a killing area where, as a player, we can collect all the drops we could possibly want. And the second is going to be at the nearest ender chest, so I can pick up as much scaffolding as I can possibly carry, because we're going to need a lot of it for building in the sky, and scaffolding seems like a worthwhile block to have around. But without further ado, let's make our way back to our drowned farm site, and let's do the setup. So here we are at the top of my big scaffolding tower. This is 128 blocks above the surface, 2 stacks of scaffolding, and we are at Y199, so I'm actually going to put 1 on the top there, make it Y200. Of course, the thing is here, once we bridge out in various different directions, we can still tell by pressing F3 where the biome is, in terms of where the river starts and where the plains ends. And so, by bridging out in various directions here, we'll be able to get the outline of the river from all the way up here, instead of having to build up from the surface. So if we start on this block here, this block is at X1826. We run along here, all of this is Minecraft plains until we get to this one at the end, which says river at 1849, and luckily enough for us, that is perfectly 23 blocks, which is the distance at which mobs are going to start spawning if they are that far away from the player. So that's actually perfect, and we can create an outline here using the biome data that's displaying on the left-hand side there. We can create an outline of where the river biome exists on the surface without having to build all the way up like a giant tower of scaffolding or something like that. We can do that kind of like manually from above here. So that's going to be plains, this is going to be a river. We can just go around the outside, and it looks like the river actually curves around there. So what we're going to do is outline where this biome begins and ends, and what spaces we can use as spawning spaces for the drowned. And while I'm doing this, I should also reiterate that you don't have to build a drowned farm this way. You can just pick a nice wide part of a river, build a giant block of water in the sky like we're about to, but you don't have to follow the pattern of the river. You don't have to seek out an area like this. I'm just interested in trying out a design where we use as much of the river space as possible, and considering that that point there is pretty distant from all of the sections that count as a river biome, I think we can get some really good spawns all around the player if we're just AFKing in that one spot. But you can just do this with a big tank of water in the sky as long as that tank is taken up by river biomes. So just pick a nice wide section of the river, go nuts with it, and see how far you get. So I figured we would do this section in the form of a time-lapse, and this is me doodling around the outside. The outline of biomes, as we have seen before when we did this with a couple of other builds, are really quite strange. And so you'll find that the river is not at all even. It has a lot of weird straight lines in it. That's just how Minecraft generates biomes. Anyway, once you've done the inside outline, do the outside outline as well. This river was a little bit strange because there was a section at the bottom which could potentially have been used for the farm, but I thought it was just going to get a little bit too far away from the center of the farm, so I didn't end up using that. Had to light the entire thing up because mobs started spawning, and then they would probably also start spawning on this stone section here, which I'm filling in so that the drowned have a platform to land on once they drop out of the farm. I should also mention, by the way, that this entire design is kind of inspired by a video Ilmango did about a river biome drowned farm, which I'm going to have linked in the description. But while the stone around there is potentially spawnable and is lit up, the central platform is made out of leaves, just to make sure that you don't have anything spawning in the middle. Right, back to the video. Hey folks, welcome back. So now we've outlined the river biome, and I could probably trim off a little bit around the edges here, because the idea is that we're going to have a turtle egg basically roughly in the center. And I know this was the center that we were working with before, but now we know the full outline of the river biome. I think the center is probably going to be more like roughly, I'd say, here. So the plan now is to reproduce this whole outline further up in the sky as the top part of the farm, and to fill in all of the remaining blocks with water, with the exception of a couple of blocks at the bottom here, and those are going to be so that the drowned can drop out onto dry land and then pathfind towards the turtle egg. Obviously, having a roof over the top of the farm is going to prevent them from burning in sunlight, so that's going to be a necessity as well, but the leaves are here to prevent anything else from spawning around here. And the only other thing that should spawn in this farm once it's all full of water is going to be fish. So I've gone away and gotten even more materials because we are going to need them. We're going to need to be able to build up the walls of the farm pretty high as well, and this is the point at which you might want to reconsider precisely how much area you are using. I'm going to stick with it, with the exception of this little spot over here, which, while that is river biome, is kind of sticking out quite far from everything else. There's going to be a limited range at which the drowned can detect this egg, which is basically a 47 by 47 square. So it's technically speaking 23 blocks in each direction, except squared off at the corners. Anything outside of that radius, the drowned aren't always going to target the egg right away. So it's probably worth going around the outside here and checking whether any of the squares of your river biome out here actually fall outside of that 47 by 47 square. I think for the most part we're going to be good here, and we can always do a little bit of trimming later on if we want to. For now, I'm just going to take off this little bump here because it's going to complicate the shape of the farm. Everything else feels more connected than that bit did. And yes, I only had 5 leaf blocks left after all of that. Now what we need to do is take some of the spruce wood here and convert this into fence gates, because once again, this is going to be a farm that uses a great deal of fence gates to block the water, basically allowing the drowned to fall through onto the platform below and then pathfind to that egg. So we're going to need to make a whole bunch of fence gates using all of the wooden sticks and stuff that we've got here, and we want each of those to be placed a couple of blocks up here, basically, so that the drowned have a 2-block high space that they can fall down into and then pathfind towards the egg. So to start us off here, I am going to make a small area of these fence gates, and we're going to set this up like we're going to set up the rest of the farm, just to give you the general idea, and then I can take care of the rest of it off camera, because this is going to be a bit of a long process, and it's going to be a little expensive in terms of the amount of fence gates we're using here. But remember, you don't have to do the entire area of the farm like this. You can just stick to one smaller stretch of river if you don't feel like you have the resources. Personally, though, I feel like this kind of farm is only really going to be necessary if you're on a highly populated server, in which case other folks can help you gather the resources for you, or you're at endgame and you're just looking to make another cool farm, in which case you've probably already got a couple of tridents just from swimming around in the ocean. You don't want to build a small-scale farm, you want to go big or go home, really. Around the outside of the fence gates, we're going to be placing this edge made out of slabs, and that's mainly there so that we can ender pearl up on top of it, like so, and then place a bunch of top half slabs on top of that. You could always remove the bottom half slabs after this if you want to, but I think it's going to look kind of neat having them there. And it's nice and easy just to make sure that there's a slab over the top of each one of these leaf blocks and a fence gate above each one of the stone blocks. So that's really not going to take all that long. We just need to make sure we have enough materials for it, really. There we go. So I've done the inside of this area here. I'm going to have to do another line around the outside as well to stop the water from spilling over the edges and getting down onto the forest and stuff below. But what we have here is a small section that I'm going to use as an example for how we're going to do the rest of the farm. We'll place some scaffolding here, and that should allow us to pillar up. We're going to make these roughly 50 blocks high because that's the space we've got to work with. Any higher and we'd be getting to basically build height, the point at which we could no longer place any more blocks. So here we are at Y252. Now, Y256 is the absolute build limit of the world. That is as high as we can possibly go. So we probably want to stop a few blocks short of that just to make sure that everything is going to be okay up here. And we want to build a similar outline, just tracing what we've got down there so that we know exactly where the roof of our farm is going to go. We'll start it on the top of the scaffolding here, and we'll trace that entire thing out and build a roof over the top of it. So the entire thing is going to be covered over. And now we've done the ring around the outside with only a half block gap there. That should be enough to contain the water. One thing we want to do is lay down a layer of blocks before we place any of the ice that's going to be providing the water sources here, because of course ice cannot turn into a water source unless it already has a block underneath it. That's something I forgot until relatively recently when I was trying to place some water sources somewhere, and I kept breaking the ice and then it would just disappear. And I went, what has gone wrong? It wasn't silk touch or anything like that. It was that the ice was not breaking and turning into a water source because it needs a block below it in order to do that. So now we've done that, all we need to do is fill this in with ice. Of course, you can be a little bit more sparing with your ice if you want to, because once the ice forms water sources, it will start to form water sources in the usual way after that. So we just have a bunch of open water here. We can use water buckets to fill in the rest of this if we want to. The main thing here is just making sure that you don't end up accidentally waterlogging the slab. So make sure that you are looking at the floor of blocks that we've placed underneath here when you want to place any of the water sources using buckets. But there we go, that's all filled in, and we should be able to take out these blocks here and let the water flow downwards, and that's going to start our spawnable area. Now this is all going to be river water, of course, and each one of these flowing water blocks will also count as a spawnable space for the drought. So you don't have to fill the entire thing up with water sources. In fact, it's better for you if you don't, because then you don't have to surround the entire thing if you don't want to. Bear in mind, of course, that it does need to be dark inside the farm, so having a roof over the top of it and extending that roof or filling in the walls are basically your only two options when it comes to enclosing this whole thing, making sure that there is. But now that's all done, we can also take down the scaffolding tower, and hopefully I've got the area of the farm right, and we should... Oh, I think we even have some drown down there already. Perfect. Couple of water sources flowing over the side. Looks like I misjudged the boundary up there, but now this giant tank of water is going to be a spawnable space for the drowned. And because it's dark right now, we'll get a few of them spawning in here already. Now remember, of course, the drowned operate on the same spawning rules as any other hostile mob. They need to be at least 23 blocks away from a player in order to spawn. So we're going to stand back a little bit here and we're going to see if we get any more drowned coming into the system. Being undead mobs, they will sink in water, so they should just start to drift downwards once they spawn in there. And I have taken away the turtle egg and put that back in my inventory with a silk touch pick, because it's probably not a great idea to have the turtle egg out here while we haven't set up the kill mechanism yet. For now, I think we might be getting some skylight creeping back in, so it looks like we don't have... Yeah, it's the sun is rising, we don't have any more drowned spawning in there right now. But all we should need to do is put a roof over the top of here, and we should be good to go. Now, it's important to note that even with a roof of slabs on the top of this farm, the light level in here is still dictated by how much light can get in from the outside. So as you can see, we have a light level of 10 right now, 11 further down the farm. That is not nearly dark enough for the drowned to be able to spawn in here during the day. We were lucky enough to get a drowned spawning at night, but for now, we are going to have to figure out a way to darken the inside of the farm, and that's why I brought a ton of materials, because initially I was thinking, how about we do the entire outside of this farm covered up? And now I'm starting to rethink that, because I can see why people tend to build a large platform over the tops of the farm instead of filling up the sides, and it's really just a matter of expense. This thing is a really large surface area, and we would have to basically build 50 blocks upwards from each section of this, so that's multiple stacks of stone or whatever material we wanted to build into it at this point. So I'm thinking maybe we will just go the traditional way and have a large ugly platform over the top of it, because realistically that's just going to mean a lot less time spent gathering materials. We're also going to need to make sure that the center of the farm is dark, so that's going to have a roof over it anyway, making sure that the drowned don't burn in the sunlight as they're walking towards the egg and the player who's going to be waiting underneath the area where the egg is standing. So naturally, we are going to have to spend a little bit of time building a large platform over the top of this, and I figure we may as well go ahead and just do the rest of the farm right here and right now. So let's go ahead and do that, and of course, I figure we can do it in the form of a time lapse. Welcome back, folks. I hope you enjoyed the time lapse, and if you're a little bit confused about why the drowned are just standing around and not attacking me in the time lapse, it's not like I'm in creative mode or something. They genuinely get really stupid if you're not standing in water. They will just stand around and not target any of you. Even if there's a villager in their presence, they will not target the villager unless he's standing in water. If you put water down, though, it gets a little bit scary because suddenly they all turn around and start coming for you at once. And oh boy, oh yeah, I'm cleaning up this water source as fast as I possibly can. Oh yeah, and once you get out of it again, they all just go back to being passive. It's so weird, but kind of cool at the same time. So anyway, what we're going to be doing is, of course, luring them into the center with a turtle egg. So we need to set up a little mechanism underneath here, and having eyeballed it a little bit, I am fairly certain that there are going to be some drowned who will come out onto the platform around here, and they'll be too far away from the center to really track to a single turtle egg, which is why we've got two, because I plan on having two individual turtle egg stations spaced a little bit far apart. This farm seems a little bit longer lengthways than it is widthways, so I think if we put maybe one over here and one over here, we should be able to encapsulate the entire spawning area of the farm, and then we can lure them into a water stream, ironically enough, that will lead them into the area where we can contain them all and kill them. So for that, I just need to run away and grab a couple of things. I'm almost out of fireworks as well, so I need to get some of those from the ender chest, but I have a couple of things that I need to take care of very quickly before we can build the kill mechanism. By the way, don't let the shaders in the time-lapse fool you. This thing is pretty ugly looking, I'll be honest. Even shaders couldn't quite disguise how ridiculously blocky this whole thing. I mean, it's so jagged and weird. And now all of the drowned should have despawned, and we probably have a fresh set in here, actually, because I've been away from the farm, although maybe they unloaded because we were in the nether. Anyway, not to worry. What we're going to do is set up our eggs, probably, like I said, there and a little bit over here. And then we're going to move all of the drowned down a little bit into an area here where they're going to be caught up in a water stream. The water stream is going to push them into some hoppers. The hoppers is where we end up attacking them with our looting sword, collecting all of the goods. We're going to achieve this by putting the egg over here behind a kind of 3x3 area of glass, probably about there. Like, this farm doesn't really have a middle, so I'm fine with that being roughly where it goes, and we're going to have the egg in here. The drowned should still be able to pathfind towards it, but what we're going to do is set up an area of trapdoors in front of the egg here, like so. So we're going to take out these leaves, and we're going to place a row of trapdoors facing that way, a row of trapdoors facing that way, and open them up like so. The drowned should not be able to pathfind around this. They shouldn't be able to cross over the trapdoor towards the egg in any way. This should hopefully allow them to just pathfind, and if this works, they should all just walk straight down into the pit. This guy looks like he might already be going for it. Yes, okay, fantastic. It does take them a little while to register that the turtle egg is there, so occasionally you'll find them taking a minute or two, but luckily it looks like we are all good here. Wonderful stuff. All right, we'll set one up on this side, but as you can see, if it was over here, then the folks on this side would have a hard time pathfinding to it as well. So we're going to set up another one a few blocks away, but this is eventually going to lead down into a couple of water streams, just bringing them together. Now, one thing to note about the little turtle egg booths here is that the eggs will need a certain amount of air blocks above them. I'm fairly certain they need 3 air blocks above them in order to still be recognized by the drowned as something they're going to be attracted to. You want to make sure there is a certain amount of space above the egg, otherwise the drowned just aren't going to want to travel to it. But hopefully, as you'll see with this guy over here, he should drop through the trapdoors on this side and immediately pick up the turtle egg. I say immediately. He'll do it after a couple of seconds wandering around, not quite sure where he is. There you go. Walk straight towards the turtle egg. No hesitation there. Let's try it with the torch above it just in case. Yep, you can see he's changed direction now. He's in the range of the other one. He's going for that one instead. But now if we take the torch away, some of the others are going to be attracted to that. And this one, I don't know, appears to have seen us because it is getting a little dark outside apparently. Now back on the underside of the farm, using the scaffold here to work from, we're going to set up the water streams, which are just going to be in this area here. They're going to start right here, I guess, right underneath where the trapdoor area is, and we just need to provide a quick slab barrier around the outside, both to stop stuff from spawning down here underneath the farm, and also to stop the drowned from walking up onto this if they feel so inclined, which they shouldn't do, hopefully. And there we have it. The collection mechanism is a little bit rudimentary, but is pretty straightforward in the grand scheme of things. And if we just give these guys a few quick taps with the looting sword, all of the loot ends up in the chest down here with just 3 hoppers, and we should be getting a little bit of gold, a little bit of rotten flesh, a little bit of everything, the occasional fishing rod, nautilus shell, and of course, those all-important tridents. So I guess the only thing that's really left to do if we want to finish this thing up is put a proper roof on it, because right now I just have the roof that's the outline of the river biome itself. I don't have the roof that will enable this thing to function even during the middle of the day, which is why we're really not getting all that many drowned spawns. If you notice the farm is not working super well, you might want to wander up here and just check that there aren't too many drowned around the periphery area of the farm. And, you know, instead of completely obliterating the farm and rebuilding it from scratch, you might just want to take out a few of these side blocks that are being the problem ones, because then if any drowned do spawn there, they'll just drop straight down to the ground level where they will probably despawn before they even hit the floor. But I did notice a couple chucking tridents at us right there, so I wonder if we can wait for them to end up in the kill mechanism, and hopefully, if the looting odds are in our favor, we might even be able to get our first trident out of this thing. Ah, well, this could be a problem. I brought my camera account in to see what was up, because I was hearing so much drown noise and only seeing a couple of them. It seems like they are still kind of able to pathfind to me here, so I wonder if maybe we can do something about that. Maybe reorient some of this area so they feel like they can get around to me. But of course, once daylight comes around, these drowned here, which are not going to despawn because I'm too close to them, will probably become passive again and start pathfinding out towards the turtle eggs. The occasional 1 or 2 are coming through to the turtle eggs, but the majority of them, including a couple wielding tridents, seem to be gathered around this central area where I am standing. I am literally a couple of blocks below them, and I even blocked myself off with a few blocks here just to see if that would make any difference. Unfortunately, they don't seem to need line of sight. They'll just detect me when it's dark. I just saw a guy with a trident coming down there, though. Looks like the kill mechanism should be receiving a couple more. And let's see if we can swipe at a couple of those to receive our first trident in the machine. I am taking a little bit of damage here. I think maybe when I hit a bunch of them, some of them are coming into contact with my player hitbox. Let's see. Yes, we have ourselves a first trident. Amazing stuff. Right, well, maybe I should cut out a section of the middle of the farm there so that when they are all clustered around, they can just drop straight down to me. How about that? And I'll admit this is not going to be the most elegant aspect of the design, but as you saw, if we're AFKing down there, then we probably want to have a nice open area above where I'm standing so that the drown can just wander in trying to get to me. So I think that works out pretty well. Doesn't seem like there are any places there where they could potentially get stuck or anything. We might have to lower this slightly on the sides just so that the baby drown don't end up you know, getting onto the sides there, because that's only 1.5 blocks tall, so regular drown won't be able to get on there, but babies might. And overall, I'm pretty happy with this. It's a bit of a monolith, but I think it's going to be really good to have the option to come here and just grab a trident basically whenever we want to. I might even leave the bed here, actually, as an option to get some sleep whenever we need to, just to pacify the drowned a little bit and allow us to reap the rewards. Well, that is going to be it for this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide, folks. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like on this episode if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care. Bye for now.